Well, hello and welcome to Stuff We Can Do in Excel, Tableau, and Power BI. I'm Richard, and this is my channel. If you like this video, by the way, click the little thumbs up like symbol down at the bottom. And also, if you really like this video, think about subscribing to the channel. So what we're going to talk about in this video is creating a dynamic named range in Excel. So let's look at some data. Now, I have another video where I talk about creating named ranges, and you might want to review that, but I'll go through some of the basics of it right here. So a named range is simply nothing more than a range of data that we've assigned a group name to. And when you do that, it allows you to be a little bit more efficient in your formula. So for example, I might want to create a named range for my sales. I've got all this information from 2015, 2022. I've got sales information and cost of goods sold information for each quarter of the year for those years. And I got a table over here, and I want to create total sales. Now, one way I can do it, of course, is simply say equals sum, and then I can highlight this range. That might be a little bit more difficult if I had 10,000 lines, but if I do it, it's pretty simple. But another way to do that is to name the range, and what we might do is I'll just click on sales and hit my Control-Shift down. That highlights the entire column of data that's in my range. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to formulas, which you see up here on the upper tab, and I'm going to go over to create from selection. And when I create from selection, the top row is going to be my name for my range. I'll hit OK, and it's going to create a named range for me. And I know it's created. I can find out two ways. First of all, over here in the location box, I can see that I've got a range of data called sales. So if I was over here, and let's say it was over in this column, and I wanted to go to my sales data, I'd click on it, and it would take me right there. Another way to notice this, if I go up here again to the formula line under define names, we can see up here name manager, and I'll make this a little bigger so you can see it. We got over here, it says name manager. When I click on name manager, it's going to open up this dialog box down here, and what it tells me is, and I can shrink that down a little bit, I guess. Anyway, it tells me that I do have a named range called sales, so I'm going to close that. So I've got this named range called sales at this point, and I can do things like I can say equals sum of sales, and when I click in the word S and just plug the first letter, it brings up an option of things that start with S, and the first one is my range of data. It's called sales, so I'll double click on that, hit enter, and sure enough it gives me the sum of that. Another way I could do this, by the way, or one way once I've got this set up, I could convert this to a table by clicking anywhere in the range, going to insert and table, and creating a table. Now the advantage of doing that is that if I add some other data down at the bottom, let's say I go to 2023 quarter one, and let's say it's $1 million, you'll notice it automatically updated my total up here in total sales, and that's really cool. Once I create the name range, I put it in a table, and I can do that. But what if you wanted to create a dynamic range, but you didn't want to put it in a table? So let's take this stuff out of the table. Let's back out of this. And there's the data. It's not in a table anymore. And I've got this formula. Let's get rid of this. Well, let's just get rid of the formula. And I want to create a dynamic named range, but I don't want to convert this range of data into a table. So what I would do is I could click anywhere in the screen. It doesn't matter where. It doesn't even have to be in the column, but I'll just go and click in the column. And now we're going to go, if you look at our screen, we're going to go up here to formulas, and we're going to click on formulas, and then we're going to go over here to define name. So I'll define the name. It's going to bring up my box down here, and I'm going to call this name dynamic sales. And I'm going to click OK. Oh, I got an error message. Why did I get the error message? So I tricked you. If you've watched my earlier video, you'll know that the name of a range cannot start with a number, it cannot start with a symbol, and it cannot have spaces in the name. And I, of course, in this name, if you go back and look at it, we'll hit OK, I have a space in this, right? Well, I got to take the spaces. So if I just, instead of putting a space, I can back this up and make it all one word, or I can just put an underscore in there. That's an actual character. It's not just a space. And now when I click OK, it's going to like that. But I'm not going to click on it yet because right now it's naming a cell instead of naming a range of cells. So I'm going to get rid of this, and we're going to create not just a range of cells. What we're going to do is using some functions, we're going to tell this dynamic range where the range starts and where it stops. We're going to use a function called the offset function. So we're going to say equals offset, and we're going to now click on, I'm going to click on the entire column. Or actually, I'm going to click up here on the starting point, which is this cell right here, C1. I'm going to click on that, and it identifies my starting place. Now, if I go back here, the way the syntax of this formula works, it wants to know if this is the cell I'm starting in, or if I'm starting in a different cell in this column. It also wants to know if I also want to go over any columns. But actually, in this case, I am going to I'm going to put a comma, and I'm going to want to go down one cell. So I'm going to tell how many cells I go down. But I'm also not going to go left to right, so I'm going to put a comma and put a 0. Okay? So I've got that 0 in there. And that tells it that I'm not going to the column to the left or the right. I'm staying in this column, but I'm going to start my numbers one cell below the starting place of my spreadsheet. Now we're going to embed in this, we're going to embed another function, and that is our count A function. Now you remember, the count function counts cells that have data in them. Now, if I just did the count, it's only going to count cells that have numbers in them. Sometimes we may want to use, we may have words in these cells. So I'm going to use the count A, so it'll capture both words, text, and numbers. And I'm going to click my open parenthesis. Now this time, what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on the entire cell range. Okay. Now what this will do, in effect, even though I highlighted and selected the entire range, it's only going to identify the items in that range that have information in the cell. Okay, so it's only going to identify members of this named range where there's information in the cell. So I'm going to do that, and actually, I'm going to set this up. I want it to start one cell below the top of the column, so I'm going to hit comma, and then -1. So it's going to, whoops, I might say -1, and that's going to actually take it down from the sales item. It's not going to count the sales item. It's going to count everything starting in one cell further down. It's a little confusing that here we use a 1 to go down one cell, here we use a -1 to go down one cell. That's just the syntax of this. So now my identification of my range is complete, and all I have to do is click, close that parenthesis, close the other parenthesis, hit enter, and I now have a named item. How do I know that? I go up into Name Manager, and there's my dynamic sales range. I've still got my sales range in there, but now I've got my dynamic sales range. And actually, I could get rid of the sales range. I can just delete it because I don't need it anymore. So we'll delete it. And I've got one range that's called dynamic_sales, right? So let's close this, and let's go see how we would use this. So what we'll do is we're going to create our formula. It's going to be equals sum. And this time, I'm not using the sales, the named range of sales. I'm using the named range of dynamic sales. I'll hit D-Y-N, and there it is. So I'll double click on it. And now I hit close parenthesis, and it will add up that number. Now, what if I add $1 million to cell C34? It adds it in. What if I add $1 million to cell C35? $1 million to cell C36? So it's adding those numbers in, right? Now this is really helpful, particularly if you range change. Maybe you want some of these numbers want to fall out, and you don't want to keep all these numbers in the range. Maybe we only want to look at numbers for the last 5 or 6 years. We don't go back to 2015. Well, you can delete those, and the dynamic range will still work, except for a problem. I identified this problem earlier. So let's say we delete cell C2, and we delete cell C3. You notice the number still is good. We should go down by about 17,000 here, and certainly we did. But watch what happens when I delete the third item. Okay, that worked. We go down to the fourth item, that doesn't work, does it? Because what happens, as soon as I started deleting, starting with the third item I deleted, I'm losing information. So when I delete here, I'm still at 3 million something, so I took that away. But when I delete the third one, I thought I should go down to about 3,534,000. Instead, I went down to 2,534,000. It not only took out that one, but it took out one of the 1 millions, which is kind of weird, right? So what I fiddled around and I figured out that instead of using the delete key to delete this information, we want to highlight the information we want to delete, and then we're going to right click and we're actually delete it from this menu. And then we're going to tell it to shift all the cells up, and when I do that, it keeps it just fine. I can delete the next data. Okay, delete, shift cells up, fine. I can do this entire big long range of data here, all the way down through 2022, and right click, delete, shift cells up, and it's going to pick up I'm not going to lose information. So what I'm telling you is, don't delete this information using the delete key. Delete this information using the delete function in Excel, and the dynamic range will maintain its integrity. So hopefully this was helpful to you on how to create dynamic ranges in Excel.